I remember the day it happened in the smallest detail, probably because it was the boundary between my past life and my future life. Kelsey, don't go on this trip. Let's spend a few days together. We can just lie in bed or go for a walk or order pizza and watch soccer. I'll even try that new seafood pizza, I suggested. In the evening, as always before his business trip, I couldn't part from him. Every time it seemed that as soon as he crossed the threshold, I would lose him forever. My heart clenched with fear. But Kelsey had been a long-haul truck driver for years and didn't want to change careers. Understand, I love the road and I couldn't live any other way, he explained. Early in the morning, my husband gave me a long kiss and walked out the door. I wiped a tear from my eyelashes and said to myself, "Stop throwing tantrums every time. He'll be back in a couple of weeks or sooner, and everything will be the same." A week later, at exactly 8 in the morning, my phone rang. I shuddered at the sound. I had been awake for some time, though, and I was drinking coffee by myself at the kitchen table. "Hello?" I answered. "June Loken?" asked a male, unfamiliar voice. "Yeah, who's that?" I really didn't like it when strangers called me. Usually they were either scammers or pushy consultants. "Your husband was in an accident yesterday. Unfortunately, he died. I couldn't remember what else the voice on the phone was saying, and I don't think I understood anything from what came next. I woke up when there was a frantic knock on the door. I was lying on the floor with a puddle of coffee next to me. I must have dropped my cup. What a weird dream, I thought, and went to open the door. Holly, my cousin, was standing on the doorstep. "What happened? We agreed to meet at your place tonight. Why didn't you open the door?" she asked. Holly stared at the puddle of coffee on the floor. "I had a nightmare," I explained, trying to get my head and the floor in order. Holly picked up the coffee mug and sniffed the contents, then shook her head incredulously. "So, what did you dream?" she asked. "I dreamed that I got a phone call informing me that Kelsey was dead." My sister knew how much I worried about my husband's business trips, so she wasn't surprised to hear about my dream. "Why aren't you answering your phone?" she asked. I picked up the phone and was confused. There were a huge number of missed calls, most of them from an unknown number. "What is it?" I asked, holding the phone out to my sister. "Apparently, I wasn't the only one who couldn't reach you this morning." Holly flipped through the call log and looked up at me. "But you have already talked to that caller today," she said. No, I quickly shook my head, not wanting to return to reality. "Holly, I guess it wasn't a dream. Got a call from a man saying Kelsey had been in an accident and died. I guess I blacked out because I woke up on the floor from a knock on the door," I explained. Sister was already dialing the number from which the call came. When they answered, she introduced herself and explained what she was calling about. She listened for a long time, nodding occasionally, and then said in a quiet voice, "Thank you. I understand." Holly hung up the phone and looked at me carefully. "Sorry, June, but it's true. I'm really sorry. It looks like you'll have to go to the place where it happened to identify him." That's how I ended up in the city where my husband died. I was still between heaven and earth, not wanting to believe what had happened. I went to the address to be identified. There, the detective officers were waiting for me. We were met by a morgue worker, and we began to fill out some papers. I don't remember exactly what was there. While I was doing the paperwork, The detective officers went out. Then the morgue asked me, "Will you examine the girl too?" It was all a blur. What girl? I didn't understand. The one who was driving? Driving what? The man was a little confused, probably thinking that my worries were making me a little crazy, which wasn't too far from the truth. Behind the wheel of the car in which her husband died. The man was clearly confused. Driving a long-haul truck? I wondered. No, a passenger car, OD. The worker was beginning to get annoyed, but then the detective officer accompanying me returned, and we left for the ID room, leaving this strange man behind. Then in the detective's office, I felt a wave of madness again, as the officer looked at me carefully and sighed sympathetically. "I understand you know nothing about the owner of the Audi, Yvonne Williams. She is your husband's common-law wife. At the time of the accident, she was driving the car, and your husband was in the passenger seat." "I'm sorry," I objected. "Wasn't my husband in an accident in his company truck?" It seemed to me that the officer was confused about something and was talking about someone else, not my husband. Hope began to build up in my heart that someone else had died in the accident, and maybe it was just someone who looked like him in the morgue. I was beginning to hope that this was some kind of mistake. "Kelsey has been living in a common-law marriage with the Yvonne Williams for 6 years. They have 2 children by this marriage. They reside at—" The officer's voice began to recede, and I realized that consciousness was about to leave me again. "No!" I exclaimed. "My husband has been married to me for 9 years. There is plenty of evidence to support this fact. So I ask you to sort things out properly and not to make up ridiculous stories." "Unfortunately, there is nothing to sort out here," the officer sighed. "There is also a lot of evidence to support this fact." When I left the office, I had only one thought in my head: to go to the address where my husband allegedly lived. As I drove up to the house, I stood in indecision. There was a tall house in front of me. Here, my husband was living a full family life with another woman. I got up my courage and walked up to the house. There was a man standing at the door, ringing the intercom, but no one answered. Then he stepped aside and took out his phone. I hurried to the door and dialed the number of the apartment I wanted. "You're in apartment 23? The man standing next to me asked. "Yes," I answered uncertainly. "Me too. I'm Warren's martial arts coach. My name is Frank. I can't reach his parents. I came to find out why the boy isn't going to class," he said. "Let's try calling the neighbors," I suggested. An elderly woman answered in apartment number 22, and she immediately opened the door for us as soon as she heard what we came for. "I live in the apartment next door, so I look after everyone here," the woman told us. "Yvonne and Kelsey's babies are also in my care at the moment, but they will soon be taken to child welfare, the police told me. If no relatives show up, the poor babies will be sent to foster care or an orphanage. Let's go to the apartment. We'll talk there while the kids watch TV. Yvonne and Kelsey have been wonderful people, helping me with everything, so I try to help as much as I can, too. I've looked after the kids before. This might be the last time I do it." "Tell me about yourself. Who are you?" the old lady asked. "I'm a distant relative of Kelsey's," I immediately lied. I'd been called in to identify the body. "And I'm Warren's martial arts coach," the man introduced himself. "Oh, you're Frank Selleck. Warren talks about you all the time. He says you're a good, strong, and wise man." The old woman wiped the tears that had come to her eyes and added, "Only now Warren can hardly attend your classes. He's an orphan now." We entered the living room. My gaze immediately fell on the pictures hanging on the walls, and the ground immediately slipped from under my feet. The picture was of my Kelsey in an embrace with a young, smiling blonde with 2 children. The boy looked a lot like my husband, and the girl looked like her mother. I was sick to my stomach. I went into the kitchen, opened the window, and breathed in the fresh air. 1,000 thoughts swirled in my head. I kept trying to find some explanation for what was happening. In the 9 years we'd been married, Kelsey had never given me the slightest reason to doubt his love for me. His feelings had never seemed fake. I loved him very much myself. "You don't feel well?" Frank walked into the kitchen. "It's okay. I feel better already," I replied. Then turning to the older woman, I asked, "Can I see Kelsey's kids?" "Yes, of course. Let's go." We went into the next room. The children were sitting on the couch watching a cartoon. When he saw his coach, the boy immediately ran up to him. "Coach Frank, I'm so glad you came." He held out his hand to the man to greet him. "Sorry I missed practice," the boy apologized. "It's okay, Warren. We'll catch up," his coach reassured him. "I don't know. Michelle and I will probably be sent to an orphanage or find us foster parents now. Only I'm afraid we won't be separated," he said in a whisper, glancing toward his sister. "And I'm going to miss your classes a lot." "You kid, don't get upset before you know it. We'll figure something out." The coach patted the boy on the back. "Besides, I can see our training hasn't been in vain. You've gained tremendous fortitude. I'm very proud of you, Warren." The boy smiled and then turned his gaze to me. "Hi," I said. "My name is June, and I'm a distant relative of your father." The boy held out his hand to me, and I shook it. "I've never seen you before," he said, looking into my eyes. "It's just that I live in another town," I explained. "That makes sense then. I'm Warren. This is Michelle." His sister smiled uncertainly. "Nice to meet you." My lips stretched themselves in a smile. Every part of little Warren reminded me of Kelsey. My heart beat fast with joy as I looked at the baby, and then it clenched and sank when I realized that he was my husband's son. My children offered me to play with them, and I couldn't refuse. I had always dreamed of having a big family, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to have children. I thought that someday Kelsey and I would adopt a baby, but we never really talked about it. After a while, I began to feel as if I had always known these children, seen them in thoughts or in my own dreams and daydreams. Every cell of me reached out to them. They didn't seem like strangers to me. They were part of my husband. While we were playing, Frank was talking to an older woman and looking at me and the children in a strange way. It turned out that getting custody of my husband's children was easier than I had imagined. Considering that they had no other relatives, I provided documentation of my job and income, as well as my and Kelsey's savings. A committee visited my house and found the conditions to be quite favorable. While the paperwork was going on, I took time off from work and attended courses from social services, which helped me a lot. Every day I became more and more confident in my decision. I think I would have lost my mind if I had been alone in my grief. But the thought of motherhood was an unexpected salvation for me. The children didn't mind moving to another city. They didn't have a problem at all. Of course, most of their attitude came from Warren. He really acted wiser than any adult in many ways. He tried his best to help me cope with a role that was unfamiliar to me. The only thing Warren lacked in the new place was martial arts classes. I was busy from early in the morning until late at night. There was still so much to do, arranging a new school for Warren and finding daycare for Michelle. Our apartment doorbell rang, and I was very surprised. Who could it be at such an early hour? When I saw the man at the door, I was even more surprised. On the doorstep was Warren's former coach, Frank. "I'm sorry I didn't warn you about the visit," he said. "So, how did you get our address?" I asked. "It wasn't hard because you gave your address to Kelsey and Yvonne's neighbor." At these words, Frank looked at me carefully and seriously. "Come inside," I called to my guest. "Warren will be thrilled. He's been talking about you nonstop. Turns out Warren's former coach now works in our city." "I've wanted to move here for a long time. I recently got an offer to head a sports school here, so I said yes right away," he said with a laugh. "So I thought I'd find out where you live so I could suggest Warren continue his classes." Coach Frank was especially fond of Warren. Apparently worried that the boy had lost both his parents, he tried to support the boy as best as he could. He often brought Warren home after class, explaining that it wasn't hard for him. We already had a tradition of having dinner together twice a week after Warren's class. We talked a lot about how the kids were coping with their new life circumstances. Frank was always polite and helped set the table. I began to notice that it wasn't just the kids he was worried about. Soon, on one of those nights, Coach Frank invited me to dinner. I was very excited and didn't know what to do. Breaking the silence, Warren said, "June, wear your red dress to dinner. You look very pretty in it." "No, the blue one." Michelle began to argue with him. In the end, we all agreed that I would wear red, since Warren was older and could advise first. But when we go on our second date, then... Whoa, kids, what second date? And anyway, it's not a date, it's just a business dinner, isn't it, Frank? I said indignantly. The blue dress came in handy for the second date. And there was a third and a fourth. On the fifth date, Frank casually mentioned my ex-husband and immediately said, "June, I'm sorry." I looked into his eyes and immediately understood. "Did you know Kelsey?" I asked. "Yes," he nodded. "I knew about you from the beginning, since Kelsey and I were old friends. He and I lived on the same street when we were kids and played together. We were very friendly back then. It just so happened that one day he was passing through our town. He called and I invited him to my birthday party. That's when he met Yvonne and they had a brief affair. Later, it turned out she was pregnant. Kelsey couldn't leave his son behind and started visiting them often. And then Michelle was born. True, Kelsey wasn't sure if the girl was his, but he didn't abandon them. Kelsey created the appearance of a real family so the children wouldn't feel deprived of parental care. But he suffered incredibly from the situation. He loved you for real, and he cursed himself terribly and said he wasn't worthy of you. He told me that you always dreamed of having children, but you couldn't have children. After his story, I longed to see you, to meet a woman who evokes such strong feelings. I often joked that I would steal you away from Kelsey, and he took great offense at me for it. When I first saw you, I knew it was you. It was as if I had known you all along. I wanted to tell you everything right away, but I was afraid I'd hurt you more. And when you adopted Kelsey's kids, I couldn't stop thinking about you. Thanks for telling me everything, I said sadly. I couldn't quite put the puzzle together in my head, and now it's all falling into place. Tell me, June, have you forgiven him? Have you forgiven Kelsey? Frank looked me straight in the eye. Of course I have. I replied. Everyone can make mistakes, but I was happy around him, and I can see that his children grew up happy too. And I know that's what he wanted. Many years have passed since then. When we saw our Warren off to university, he hugged all of us one by one. First his sister, who turned into an unreal beauty. Then his adoptive father, Frank. He left me for last. When Warren finally hugged me, he whispered in my ear, "I love you so much, June, and I thank you for your kindness and love. You are the best mom ever."